The wedding ceremony was a mood of joy and emotion, until an embarrassing moment shook the harmony of the event. Right in the midst of the celebrations, the mother-in-law decided to mark territory in a humiliating way. In a firm, superiority voice, he announced to all the guests, "The apartment I'm giving to the bride and groom is in my name, so this girl doesn't even dream of having rights to him." And to make its power clear, he stirred the documents before everyone as a trophy. Meanwhile, in an elegant luxury boutique, Ingrid Malachova watched her reflection in the Three Faces mirror. At 50-5, his slender body enhanced the dress of 120,000 riaris, which fell like a glove. But something was missing. "Maybe a brooch," suggested sales consultant, a 20-year-old with a professional smile glued to his face. "We have stunning pieces in our collection." "No way." Cut Ingrid, dry. "I'm not preparing for my own birthday. I'm the groom's mother, you know? And my dress needs to reflect it." The girl, without losing the composure, nodded and ran in search of other options. Ingrid, meanwhile, took off his cell phone and made some selfies, analyzing every detail with critical looks. "In a wedding, the groom's mother should shine like a queen," he said, as if talking to herself. "But without overshadowing the bride, of course." The last sentence was spoken with a tone of generosity falsetto, as if doing a favor of future daughter-in-law. After all, dazzling Lisa would not be difficult. A bland girl, without style, without any sophistication. How could Igor choose someone like that? This question still intrigued her. After 3 hours of events, Ingrid finally decided on an emerald dress, signed by an Italian designer. It cost 30,000 riaris more than planned, but who measures efforts for such a special moment? What's more, everyone had to see that the groom's mother was not any, but a woman of impeccable taste and unlimited resources. "Tamara, you have no idea of the dress I bought," Ingrid said, sinking into an armchair while enjoying a half-sweet cup of champagne. "Pure Italian handicrafts, with lace that left even my fallen jaw hairdresser." Across the line, Tamara, her friend since college, murmured something in approval. "And the party will be breathtaking," Ingrid continued. "Remember that apartment I bought for Igor at Solar das Trees Solar? A kitchenette, but which kitchenette? 3-meter ceiling, viewed to the square, a renovation signed by a renowned designer." Tamara asked a question, and for a moment Ingrid's face contracted. "Ah, my dear, what difficulties? What is not done for the only child?" She laughed nervously. 4 million. "But you know how prices are in the highest." He paused, listening to his friend, and then lowered his voice, though he was alone in the apartment. "Well, I had to turn a little. I got a 20-year funding from my own home. But you understand why, don't you?" And, as if remembering something crucial, he approached even closer to the phone, almost whispering, "The apartment is in my name. I told them that it would go to their name after marriage, but who knows what might happen?" The conversation extended for almost an hour. Ingrid commented on every detail: the guests, the ceremonialist expensive, but who was worth every penny, after all, had worked at the marriage of the deputy governor's daughter, and even the photographer, coming directly from Sao Paulo. The first meeting with Lisa was still alive in her memory, as if it had happened yesterday, not a year and a half before. Igor took his girlfriend for a Sunday lunch, warns in advance that the relationship was serious. Ingrid then set a real test. He prepared his famous beef stroganoff, served in crystals he only wore on New Year's Eve, and extended the thinner linen towel. Not to impress the girl, but to make clear the level of the Malachova family. Lisa arrived with a bouquet of cheap chrysanthemums, which Ingrid purposely placed far away, in the window, not on the main table. The young woman wore a simple blue dress without jewelry, just a silver chain with a discreet pendant. "So you work at a travel agency?" Ingrid asked, examining her up and down. "Yes, on Planet Viagens. 3 years ago," said Lisa, smiling. "And is the salary good?" Ingrid ignored his son's warning look. "Mother, for God's sake. I'm just informing myself about her perspectives, Igor. And your parents, Lisa? What do they do?" The girl, keeping her smile, responded quietly, "My father is a mechanical turner in a factory, and my mother is a saleswoman in a clothing store." "Ah, is it?" He lengthened, cutting a piece of the cake. And the formation? I made savings in a pedagogical institute. Not at a university, of course, Ingrid added, with a triumphant smile. But I plan to do a second degree in tourism. Plans are always good, agreed Ingrid, condescending. Igor also has plans. 2 years ago he promises to defend his doctorate. Lunch followed, Ingrid fired sharp questions, Lisa responded with education and brevity, while Igor unsuccessfully tried to change the subject. When the visit ended, Ingrid was straightforward with her son. She's not at her height, Igor. A simple girl without ambition, without refinement. Do you deserve someone better? Remember Verchanin's daughter? Has parents' apartment, own car. Mom, I love Lisa, said Igor, firmly, though his voice shaped slightly. And I'm going to marry her. Ingrid sighed, theatrical. Do as you like. But don't cry later, saying I didn't warn you. More than a year has passed since that conversation. Ingrid did not give up trying to dissuade his son, but realized that this time Igor was determined. Then it changed its strategy. If I could not rule out the unwanted daughter-in-law, at least he would take advantage of the situation. The idea of the apartment came as a master blow, a grand gesture that would show everyone, relatives, friends, and especially the humble family of Lisa, how exceptional she was like a mother. After all, that ordinary workers could offer their daughter such a gift. Ingrid almost felt the weight of respect grow in the looks of others. That the apartment was mortgaged, that she had indebted herself for 20 years, that her own home was at stake, well, these were details that only she and Tamara knew. And it would remain. The name of Ingrid Borisovna Leopoldovna sounded like a sentence when pronounced with that calculated superiority. And of course, the documents meticulously prepared, all duly registered in its name, as if generosity needed a contract to be valid. A week before the wedding, Ingrid invited Lisa to a tea, supposedly to adjust the last details. In fact, I wanted one last opportunity to measure the future daughter-in-law, to prove once again that she was on an unreachable level. Is the dress already bought? He asked as he served tea in porcelain inherited from his mother, pieces that, she said, ordinary people would not even know. Yes, a month ago, said Lisa, serena. And where? Ingrid arched his eyebrow, as if the answer already disappointed her. I hope not at any ready-made dressing store. A disguised gesture accompanied the words. It was in a studio on Lesnaya Street. They have very beautiful options and reasonable prices. Reasonable, Ingrid repeated, as if the word left a bitter taste in his mouth. I bought mine at Elegant Lady. Do you know how much it costs? Made a dramatic break, in. Let's not wait for an answer. 150,000. Italian, of course. He observed the reaction of Lisa, eager for a sign of envy or dismay. And the hairstyle? I will do with Gennady in Madame Coco. 15,000 only by the brush. But for such an occasion, no effort is measured. Lisa smiled, polite, impassive. I'm sure you'll be stunning, Ingrid Borisovna. I hope so, he agreed to another, satisfied with herself. Oh, and speaking of not measuring efforts. Let the phrase hover, as if what would come after a gift, not a weapon. The apartment documents are ready. A 4 million gift, my dear. It is not anyone who does this for a child. Igor mentioned his generosity, Lisa replied without a trace of emotion in her voice. Generosity, Ingrid laughed, as if the word were too small to describe it. 4 million is no joke. And your parents? What did they give? They paid half the banquet, said Lisa, quiet. Ingrid let out a condescending sigh. It's not the same as an apartment, isn't it? When Lisa said goodbye, Ingrid called Tamara, her usual accomplice. You won't believe it, he whispered, still excited about his own cunning. She didn't even blink when I talked about the 4 million. Cold as ice. But wait until the ceremony. When everyone knows that scripture is in my name. Then we will see if it keeps this calm. Across the door, Igor heard the echoes of the conversation and closed his eyes, tired. He loved his mother, but every day it made it harder to ignore his sick pleasure in humiliating others under the mask of benevolence. After marriage, everything gets better, he repeated himself, like a mantra. When they were in the new home, that house, Ingrid would have to accept Lisa. I would have to stop treating it like an intruder. But the wedding day dawned too clearly for dark omens. May's light invaded Lisa's room, dancing over the wedding dress hanging at the cabinet door. She woke up before the alarm clock, immovable for a few minutes, absorbing reality. Today everything changes. The cell phone vibrated at the bedside table. A message from Igor. Good morning, almost wife. I can't wait to see you on the altar. I love you. Lisa smiled and started responding when she heard light knocks on the door. Lizochka, can I come in? The mother's voice sounded muffled, thrilled. Naini came in with a tray steaming coffee and newborn bliss. I thought the bride deserved coffee in bed, he said, sitting on the edge of the mattress. How did you sleep? Well, Lisa lied, accepting the cup. Just a little nervous. Normal, the mother nodded. In my wedding, I trembled so much that I could barely eat. They were silent for a moment, until Il, with the sharp intuition of those who know the daughter like no one else, asked. Lisa. You're hiding something. Lately looks tense. Lisa sighed. I didn't want to worry them on the eve of the wedding, but the mother always knew how to read her silences. There's one thing, he admitted. But I realize. It's about Ingrid Borisovna, and her gift. The apartment. Mother frowned. Yes. Lisa landed the cup. Do you remember that complex, Solnechny Terezi? Well. It only exists on paper. There is no foundation, just a hole in the floor and a built on the brink of bankruptcy. Inni was paralyzed. He is sure. It can be a mistake. I went there with Katia. And checked the records. Lisa shook her head. Or Ingrid don't know what you got into, or just want to look generous without being. And what are you going to do? The mother squeezed her hand. Tell Igor. No, said Lisa firmly. Not today. It's our day. I won't let her spoil him. Inni observed it, worried. Do you think she's going to set a scandal at the ceremony? I'm sure, Lisa smiled, bitter. But I'm prepared. I just ask one thing, if something happens, not interfere. They smiled, pretend that everything is perfect. Promise. The mother hesitated, but nodded. He knew that when Lisa made a decision, there was no return. At 11 a.m., the Croft SOV apartment was sealing. The makeup artist arrived, followed by the hairdresser. Friends Svetlana and Katia played, serving champagne and drowning nerves in laughs. Look at you, Katia sighed when Lisa finally appeared with her dress. Igor will faint. Lisa was observed in the mirror. The simple, elegant model enhanced her silhouette without drawing more attention than her face. Light makeup, intertwined hair with fresh flowers. Perfect. You, friend, Svetlana raised the cup. For your future. It was then that the phone rang. Ingrid Borisovna blinked on the screen. Hello, my angel. The voice of the future mother-in-law sounded falsely excited. How is the future bride? Ready for the big day? Good morning, Ingrid Borisovna, said Lisa, Serena. Yes, everything as planned. Wonderful. Exclaimed the other. I just called her. I have a very special gift for you. I won't spoil the surprise, but let's say, it has to do with the apartment. Lisa felt her stomach contract. Even now, on her own daughter's day marrying, Ingrid could not resist the temptation to reaffirm her power. Since it's kind of your part, he said neutral. Igor and I thank you a lot. Of course, Ingrid laughed. Even at the altar. And don't be late, it's bad omen. When he hung up, Svetlana watched her, intrigued. It is good too. Everything, Lisa lied, forcing a smile. But the weight in the chest said the opposite. Lisa seemed perfectly comfortable. After all, it was just the mother-in-law showing her usual anxiety. The bell rang, announcing the arrival of his father. Anatoly Petrovich, a robust man with kind-eyed eyes and silver strands in the temples, stopped on the doorway when he saw her in the wedding dress. Dachenka, it was all he could say, and his eyes shone suspiciously. How beautiful you look. Lisa approached and hugged him tightly. Thank you, Dad. For everything. He palmized her clumsy in the back, trying not to knead the fabric. Enough, Otherwise let's cry ahead of time. The car is waiting. Let's. The Primosky District Wedding Palace received the bride and groom with the freshness of the air conditioners and a solemn melody. Upon clinging on his father's arm, Lisa spotted Igor immediately. He was by a column, adjusting the tie knot with trembling fingers. Seeing her, he froze. Her face illuminated with such a genuine joy that her heart squeezed. A few steps away, Inga Borisovna displayed her emerald dress, that dress, which she had talked about so much. The hair was tidy in an elaborate construction, and around the neck shouted a massive emerald necklace, clearly rented for the occasion. When Lisa approached, the mother-in-law scanned her with a calculating look. Cute. Very cute, he said with a forced smile. This minimalism, you can see that you have good taste. Thank you, Inga Borisovna, answered Lisa, Serena. You are also stunning. The mother-in-law adjusted the necklace with triumphant air. Ah, they are nonsense. I just didn't want to overshadow the bride and groom. Igor, finally being detached from immobility, advanced and took Lisa's hand. You are the most beautiful bride in the world, he whispered, the damp eyes. And I am the luckiest man. The ceremony has shown as a hazy dream, exchange of alliances, solemn oaths, signatures in the registration book. When they were finally declared husband and wife, the hall exploded in applause. After the traditional kiss and the words of the official, the guests surrounded them with wishes of happiness. Lisa noted that Inga Borisovna remained separately, squeezing the bag hard, clearly waiting for the right time. When the flood of congratulations cooled and the guests gathered in the large lobby for the photos, the mother-in-law stepped forward. A momentinho de Athen. Dear friends. The voices went out, the eyes turning to her curiously. Igor looked at her confused. Mom, something happened? Oh, nothing bad, said Inga Borisovna with a radiant smile. The time for my theatrical gesture came. With an apartment in the Solnekhnaya Terrasa residential complex. For 1,000,000 rubles, he raised his voice to make sure they all hear. A fortune, no? A murmur of approval traveled the hall. Lisa felt Igor tension beside him, clearly embarrassed by the exposure of values. But Inga Borisovna took a dramatic pause. The apartment is in my name, he announced, triumphantly. The silence that followed was deafening. The guests were petrified, between shock and discomfort. Someone coughed nervously. Anatoly Petrovich stepped forward, but Natalia Anatolievna held her arm, reminding him of her daughter's request not to interfere. Igor paled with shame and fury. Mom, what are you saying? His voice trembled. Inga Borisovna, oblivious to the reactions, enjoyed her moment of glory. I just want everyone to know the truth. The property is mine, and I allowed them to live there for pure generosity. To a general surprise, Lisa showed no shake or indignation. He kept his eyes serene over his mother-in-law, until he outlined a slight smile. Thanks for the enlightening, Inga Borisovna, he said, soft. We appreciate your forecast. The mother-in-law hesitated, clearly disarmed. Tears expected, scandal, humiliation, not that calm. Be good. I'm glad you know your place, he stammered, trying to recover the composure. And know who is dealing with. Igor looked at his mother to his wife, stunned. Lisa, aren't you upset? Mom, what the hell did you do? We had a deal. It's okay, Igor, Lisa squeezed her hand gently. Let's not spoil our day. We talked about it later. The photographer, feeling the heavy weather, suggested that they retract the photos. The relief guests turned to traditional rituals, but the atmosphere was already poisoned. Whispers and disapproval glances accompanied Inga Borisovna. An hour later, when the official ceremony ended and the guests were heading to go to the restaurant, Igor pulled Lisa to a corner. Sorry for my mother, he said faded. I had no idea what she planned. She promised that the apartment would be ours. I know, Lisa stroked her face. And don't worry. Everything will be solved. How can you be so calm? He insisted incredulously. She just humble you in front of everyone. Lisa smiled, enigmatic. Let's say I have reason not to shake so much with this apartment. At the Morskaya Zvezda restaurant, the banquet was still excited. The master of ceremonies announced gifts, The guests danced and laughed, gradually forgetting the embarrassing episode in the notary's office. Inga Borisovna, sitting at the main table alongside Liza's parents, thrown triumphant looks toward the daughter-in-law. "You raised a very comprehensive daughter," he said, addressing Natalia Anatolievna. "Anyone would have armed a scandal because of the property. My daughter can distinguish what matters from what doesn't matter," said Liza's mother, Serena. "And it values people, not their goods." Inga Borisovna snorted. "Of course, easy to talk about when you have nothing. I worked all my life, saved to give my son the best. And now, should I deliver everything to the first that appears?" Anatoly Petrovich, usually contained, lost patience. "Allow me to observe, Inga Borisovna, that our daughter works and conquers what she has. And although not, let's be millionaires, we created a dignified person." He paused significantly. "This, believe me, is worth more than any apartment." The mother-in-law opened her mouth to retort, but her phone touched. He looked at the screen with irritation, about to ignore, but recognizing the number. "Sorry, I need to answer," he murmured, raising himself towards foyer. Natalia Anatolievna exchanged a look with her husband. "She's strange," he said softly. "Is Liza right about this property story?" "We'll soon know," Anatoly Petrovich shrugged. "But I trust our daughter's instinct." Inga Borisovna came back 15 minutes later, visibly shaken. His face was pale, his hands shake as he picked up the cup of champagne and emptied it from a sip. Meanwhile, Liza and Igor, as tradition drove, received greetings, danced and smiled. But Liza realized the change in her mother-in-law's mood and instantly knew that something was wrong. The honeymoon? Don't even think. Igor had a crucial project at work, and he herself had just been promoted. Neither could afford to luxury a long removal at that time. They then planned a trip to a few months ago, when professional obligations were resolved. Meanwhile, the couple provisionally settled in Liza's parents' apartment. Igor had insisted on renting a space just for them, but Natalia Anatolievna, with that maternal stubbornness that does not accept refusal, demanded that they were under the same roof, until the issue of home ownership was resolved. It was that night, after the last guests were gone and the silence finally took over the house, which Igor confronted his wife. The bedroom door closed with a soft click, isolating them from the world. "I don't understand how you could be so calm about what my mother did today," he said, the voice loaded with a contained frustration. "She practically deceived us, Liza. In front of everyone." Liza sat beside her on the edge of the bed, her fingers intertwined with him with a reassuring firmness. "Igor, I need to tell you something about the Sunnylands and this apartment that your mother swore to have bought for us." And then, with surgical clarity, she defined every detail of the investigation she had done: the paralyzed work, the hole in the floor where the building should be, the bankruptcy rumors of the construction company, the court proceedings accumulating like an avalanche about to collapse. Igor heard everything in an increasingly heavy silence, the tense shoulders, the knot fingers whining. "Are you saying that she threw 4 million rubles in the trash?" His voice broke, almost a whisper. "But why? What meaning does such an absurd gesture have?" Liza didn't hesitate. To seem generous in the eyes of others. To feed this image of a powerful woman, who can give gifts of invaluable value without blinking. She paused, watching her husband's devastated expression. "And I think that call she received during the banquet. It was not good news. Probably the first warning that everything was crumbling." Igor covered his face with his hands, as if he tried to block the reality. "God from heaven, and she still took a loan using her own as guarantee. If the construction company fails, she will be left out of," Liza added, her voice low, but firm. "And I think that's exactly what will happen." Igor lifted his eyes, damp with powerless anger. "Thank you," it murmured, "for not setting a scandal when she made that ridiculous ad. I would have understood if you—" He didn't finish the sentence. "I didn't need to. It was our day," said Liza, simple. "And I wouldn't let it be spoiled even more." Liza's forecast came faster than anyone could imagine. Less than a month after the marriage, Novi Horizont, the construction company that had promised paradise in the Sunnylands, was declared bankrupt. "Your assets were frozen. and buyers, Inga Borisovna among them, turned a mere numbers in an endless line of desperate creditors. She ran as a lawyer, exasperated, demanding justice, but all she got was a tone paper confirming her place on the hope list. The chance to recover even a fraction of what she had invested was derived. The final blow came when the bank that funded its loan began the process of executing the mortgage. Inga, who had the rapid resale of the non-existent apartment to pay off the debt, was trapped. The late installments accumulated, and the threats of losing to their own home their last refuge became real. Igor, despite all the resentment of his mother's staging, could not turn his back. Along with Lisa, all options exhausted, consultations with lawyers, attempts to renegotiate the debt, but the situation was irreparable. "I will have to sell the apartment," finally admitted to a tense family dinner. The pride that previously sustained her had faded, leaving only the emptiness of a woman who had lost everything. "The bank said that even if I sell it on my own, the value will barely cover the main one. It will be zero for interest. And where are you going to live?" Igor could not hide the desperation in his voice. Inga opened her hands in a gesture of defeat. "I don't know. Maybe rent a room somewhere. Mother." The word came out like a command. "We will help. We will find a cheap place, and I will contribute to the rent. But you will need to get a job. Work." She blinked confused, as if the idea was absurd. "But I've been retired for 10 years. Retirement does not pay a rent," I intervened Lisa, without roughness. "In my company, they need an office manager. It is not complicated. You realize." I eat it, looking for signs of sarcasm or revenge on the daughter-in-law's face. He found nothing but genuine serenity. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice shaking. "After what I did at your wedding party." Lisa did not hesitate. "Because you are my husband's mother. And we are family. No matter what happens." 2 months after the construction company's bankrupt, the life of all had taken a new course. Inga sold her 2-bedroom apartment, settled the debt with the bank and rented a modest room in a communalka near the center. With Lisa's nomination, he got his job at the tourism agency, nothing glamorous, but enough to survive. Meanwhile, the couple rented a 2-bedroom apartment in a residential neighborhood, simple but cozy, and, above all, yours. Lisa had been promoted to senior manager, and Igor was striding in her career. As for Inga, the fall had been brutal but necessary. Losing the status, the house, the generosity facade had left her exposed in a way she has never been before. Wounded pride hurt, but for the first time in years it allowed itself to be only human. The tensions between daughter-in-law and mother-in-law did not disappear. Old scars take time to heal, but something began to change. Inga has never apologized formally for the marriage episode, but his gestures, his silent gratitude, spoke louder than words. 2 years later, a cold morning of January, Lisa woke up Igor with news that would change everything. "I'm pregnant," she said, her eyes shining. "Let's have a baby." Igor's happiness was overwhelming. He lifted her on her lap, spinning the living room, kissing her between laughs and run-over promises. When the initial euphoria cooled, he held her face in his hands. "We need to tell my mother. She will be euphoric." Lisa nodded. "Invite her to dinner over the weekend." Inga received the news of the birth of the first granddaughter, a girl, as the ultrasound revealed, with tears in her eyes. It was the first time Lisa saw her truly thrilled, without masks, without calculations. "I'm going to be a grandmother," whisper. "You Inga, as if you haven't believed it yet. It's too much." Sophia was born in August, healthy, strong, with Lisa's eyes and Igor's stubborn chin. The arrival of the granddaughter gave the Inga a purpose that she did not know she needed. She asked permission to visit, timid, as if she had to bother. "Of course you can come," said Lisa the first time, with a smile. "Just let me know before. Sophia and I have our routine." Of course, I was hurriedly. "I understand." There was no speech about the most generous mother-in-law in the world or empty ostentations. Life taught her to value the essentials, the laughter of the granddaughter, the affection of his son, the respect albeit cautious of the daughter-in-law. Sometimes, while shook Sophia in her arms, Inga thought in the past, the woman who had been, obsessed with looking better, richer, more powerful than she was. And I felt a twinge of sadness, not for the loss of money or prestige, but for the time spent on illusions. Because now, for the first time, she had something real. This is what she was real. The woman who proudly almost destroyed the happiness of her own son. "You know, my love," he whispered to his granddaughter, while Sophia's delicate fingers played with the silver strands of her hair, "your mother is a very wise woman. Much wiser than I was at her age. And I want you to grow up like that too, smart, strong, good. Really, not just a facade." Sophia blinked sleepy, smiling with her little teeth mouth, not understanding the words, but feeling in her grandmother's tone of voice something that needed no explanation: love without conditions, without calculations, without masks. And Inga Borisovna, lost in that clear look as the sky of autumn, finally understood the lesson that life taught him too late. The true wealth is not in luxurious apartments or in designer dresses, but in the ability to love without demanding anything in return. The last days of October have surprised with unusual heat. Inga Borisovna slowly pushed the cart through the park's mall, where Sophia, 3, slept with her fist against her cheek, just like Igor when she was young. Every morning on Saturday, in the last 2 years, they followed the same ritual: a phone call, asking for permission to take the granddaughter, precise instructions on times and meals, and then those precious hours alone with Sophia, who became her genuine happiness island in the midst of a life now modest for what was one day. Communal, where it rented a quarter, the meager office of office manager, the account of each penny. None of this compared to the weight of the mask it had carried for decades. And yet, it was there, between peeled walls and reduced dreams, which I eat felt lighter. As if, by losing everything, he had found the only treasure that really mattered. "Grandma, look." Sophia suddenly woke up, pointing to a squirrel that jumped between the branches of a board. "It's a squirrel, my son," he smiled, InGen, taking a bag of hazelnuts out of his pocket. He had purchased them the night before, calculating how many days of grotch without butter would be needed to compensate for that small luxury. But it had been worth every coin. The granddaughter's eyes shone with enthusiasm while the cautious pet accepted the walnuts of his little hand. "Grandma, why don't you live with us?" The question came without warning as they returned home. "You don't have a house, and we have a new apartment, very big." Inga stopped. It was true. A month earlier, Igor and Lisa had bought a 3-bedroom property, real, tangible, nothing like those damn sunny lands that never existed. A real home. "Grandma has her little house, honey," she answered, stroking the girl's hair. "Little, but mine." "But Mom said it's just a room." Sophia frowned. "This is not a house." Inga could not avoid a bitter smile. Children say truths that adults strive to beautify. "Your mother is right," he admitted. "It's just a room. But it's my home. So why don't you live with us?" He insisted his granddaughter. "We have a room of guest. Mom said it's to her sister when she is born, but he wasn't born yet." Sister. The words echoed like a bell. Was Lisa pregnant again? Why had no one to tell you? Inga felt the floor shake under her feet. "Sister." He repeated it carefully. "Yeah." Sophia nodded, enthusiastic. "Mom said to Daddy I'm going to have a brother or sister, but it's a secret." Suddenly, the girl took her finger to her lips. "I shouldn't have spoken." Inga knelt in front of her granddaughter, taking her little hands. "Don't worry, my angel. Let's keep this secret only between us." The way to Igor's building was a whirlwind of thoughts. A second child. And she discovered by chance through a 3-year-old child. It was not surprising, in fact. After the scandal at marriage, after years of manipulation and lies, who could blame them for not trusting her? Lisa was polite, allowed him to see Sophia, but kept an insurmountable distance, the legacy of wounds that ends her self-inflicted. When he arrived on the floor, Lisa was already waiting for her at the door. Sophia ran into her mother's arms, chattering over her squirrel and the specs I had given to him. "Thank you for walking her," Lisa said, looking at Inga with an expression that was neither cold nor forced for the first time. "Do you want to come in? Top." It was so unexpected that Inga hesitated. Usually she just handed her granddaughter and left. But today something was different. As he crossed the threshold, he smelled fresh ink and new wood. The apartment was large, bright, with a functional and welcoming design, no ostentation, just good taste. On the walls, family photos, on Sophia's shelves, books and toys. "Sit down," Lisa said, pointing to the kitchen. "Igor arrives from the gym soon. He will be happy to see her." Ingoli settled at the table, shaking hands around the cup of tea. It was the first time Lisa invited her to stay. Something is happening, he thought. "Your home was beautiful," he said, sincere. "Congratulations." "Thank you," smiled Smooth, serving a piece of homemade cake. "We took a long time to choose. We wanted room for the family to grow." Family grow. The words confirmed what Sophia had revealed. Inga took a sip of tea, trying to contain the emotion. I heard from Sophia, started cautiously, "Maybe there is a news here." "A new member in the family?" Lisa froze. Sighed. "Sophia doesn't know how to keep secrets," he admitted, running his hand over his still discreet belly. "I'm pregnant. 12 weeks. We were going to count on Sunday lunch." "Congratulations," Inga said, the embargoed voice. "It's wonderful news." Lisa observed it for a long moment, as if weighing each word before talking to them. "Inga Borisovna, I want to talk to you for a long time. About us. About our relationship." Inga's heart accelerated. That serious tone left her in guard. "I'm listening," said, forcing my voice to be firmly. Lisa sat in front of him, his hands crossed on the table. "Igor and I thought a lot about it," it started. "With the arrival of the second child, we will need help. And we decide, invite her to live with us. In the guest room. If you want, of course." Inga held the cup so hard that she feared breakdown it. Of all the possible outcome for that conversation, that was the last one he had imagined. Do you want me to live with you?" he repeated, incredulously. "After all?" "Yes," it answered Lisa, simple. "You are the mother of Igor. The grandmother of our children. And despite our difficult past, I see how you have changed. I see how you love Sophia." Inga's eyes burned. 3 years living alone, in a rented room, seeing the son and granddaughter only on weekends. 3 years paying for pride, the need to look more than it was. And now? "Why are you doing this for me?" It was all that managed to ask, V.O.Z. broken. Lisa stared at her with a long, penetrating look. "Because you changed, Inga Borisovna," he said softly. "Because Sophia loves her." "And why?" "Because everyone deserves a second chance. Especially when the real conquest." She wanted nothing more that couldn't be given sincerely, without second intentions. Those walls, that morning-lit room, the children's laughs echoing through the corridors, all this was more than deserved. And yet something inside her still resisted to accept that it was real. That was not a dream of which he would wake up back to that rented room, smelling mold and loneliness as unique companions. "Are you sure?" Lisa insisted, as if he read his thoughts. "It's not a gift, Inga Borisovna. It is security. It is the certainty that no matter what happens, you will always have a place." The old woman looked at the documents, then to the hands of Lisa, who rested on the table with a calm that only those who have really forgiven can have. She thought of every year she had measured the value of people for what they could offer her: money, status, influence. And now, for the first time, someone offered him something much rarer: trust. "I accept," he said finally, his voice shaking. "But not for the papers. I accept because I know that, for you, this is not a transaction. It is a gesture. And she swallowed, "I want to learn to receive gestures without suspecting them." Lisa smiled, a smile that illuminated the tired face of the afternoon. "So it's arranged. Let's sign tomorrow when Igor arrives." The weeks passed, and life in those 4 walls became more than a refuge, it became a home. Inga Borisovna woke up early to prepare coffee while Lisa still slept, exhausted from the nights with the baby. Sometimes she would take Mikhail on her lap and take him to the porch, where the morning sun warmed her faces while telling stories about his father, how young, also frowned at that way when she didn't like the baby food. "You're just like him," she murmured, passing her fingers through her grandson's soft test. Stubborn, but good. Sophia, in turn, had become her shadow. The girl loved to help her grandmother water the plants or cook, which, in practice, meant mixing flour and water until she formed a folder that Inga Borisovna, with infinite patience, turned into edible dumplings. At night she was the one who read the fairy tales, giving voice to the characters with a drama that made her granddaughter laugh until she could no longer. "You should be an actress, Babo Boka," Safia said, applauding. "I've been, Zaychik," said Inga Borisovna, flashing. "Only on the stage of life, and my role wasn't the best." But now, she thought as she caught the toys scattered around the room, she had finally found a script that was worth following. One afternoon, as she tidied the photo album Lisa had recovered from a box forgotten at the bottom of the closet, Inga Borisovna came across an image of her, years ago. The expensive dress, the pearl necklace, fake but nobody knew, the smile that looked more like a mask. She touched her face in the picture, as if she could erase those bitterness wrinkles. "Who was that woman?" Sofia asked, peering over her shoulder. Inga Borisovna closed the album with a sigh. "Someone who was still learning to be happy, Detka. Sometimes we take time to understand that the most precious things are not the ones that shine." The girl frowned, confused. "But your necklace shone." "It was shone," the grandmother agreed, caressing her granddaughter's hair. "But it didn't warm up. And that was it, deep down, it made all the difference." The warmth of Mikhail's hands grabbing his finger. The smell of fresh bread that Smooth let cool on the table. The way Igor, when she came from work, always greeted her with a kiss on the forehead, as if she were an indispensable part of that nucleus. In that as he watched the family gathered at the table, laughter, silly discussions about who was going to wash the dishes, the way Lisa and Igor exchanged glances when they thought no one saw, Inga Borisovna felt something close inside her. Not a door, but a cycle. The scars still hurt, yes, but they no longer bleed. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe she deserved to be there. Not because of the room, documents, or the past you had tried to erase. But because, in the end, loving and being loved was not a privilege, it was a choice. And she had finally done it. Now she valued what she once considered insignificant: her grandmother's sincere smiles, her daughter-in-law's warm look, her son's quiet confidence, a respect that no money from the world could buy. A love that does not average status or possessions, but that came without conditions, without charges, as a gift that only the humble of heart can receive. 5 years later, on a sunny May afternoon, Inga Borisovna was sitting on the same bench as the park where she once walked with little Sofia still crawling. Beside her, the 8-year-old girl devoured the pages of a book with the intensity of those who discover worlds. Later, the youngest, a 5-year-old Mishka, was furiously pedaled by the Alameda, while Igor watched him with the discreet pride of who knows that the greatest legacy is not the things that are left, but the people who graduate. "Grandma, is it true that you have lived in another house?" Sofia asked suddenly. He looked up at the book with a curiosity that only children have, the one who knows no filters or fears. "It's true," Inga confirmed, with a smile that no longer needed to hide anything. "I had my apartment, then a room in a communalka, and then came to live with you." "But why did you lose your home?" he insisted his granddaughter, and Inga felt the weight of the question as an invitation to be sincerely. How to explain to a child the arrogance that blinds, the empty desire to see more than it is, the illusion that respect is bought with things? Took a deep breath before answering. "Sometimes, Zyka, people make mistakes. I made mine. I wanted to show everyone that it was rich and generous, when it was actually either. And I paid a high price for this lie." Sofia's eyes, so serious, so similar to Lisa's, stared at her with a gravity that didn't match her age. "Did you get sad?" "In the beginning, a lot," Inga admitted, bluntly. "But then I understood one thing. True wealth is not in bank accounts or well-decorated walls. It's here." He made a wide gesture, encompassing the park, the family, the air they breathed together. "It's in having people who accept you as you are, with your flaws, your stumbles, your scars." Sofia nodded thoughtfully, as if keeping those words for a future she could not name. "How did Dad and Mom did with you?" Inga smiled, and this time there was no shadow on her face, just the soft light of those who finally allowed to be loved. "Exactly like that. They gave me a second chance, even though I didn't deserve it." He lowered his voice, as if shared a secret. And you know, Miller, it made me richer than I ever went. That's when Mishka shot her bike, followed closely by Igor, who approached the safe step of those who no longer need to prove anything to anyone. What are you talking about so serious? He joked, sitting next to them. Of the wealth of truth, said Sophia, with the solemnity of a child philosopher. Grandma said that being rich is when they love you. Igor looked at his mother, and at that moment there was no need for words. He saw beyond the wrinkles, beyond the years. He saw the woman who, after stumbling in her own superb, had remedied not to conquer the world, but to deserve what really mattered. Inga Capto. Us his gaze and smiled. The way had been long of the haughty woman, capable of humiliating her daughter-in-law for an ephemeral triumph, to her grandmother who now understood the invaluable value of the bonds that weave a family. A path marked by pain, loss and regrets, but in the end, he had given him something that no million could buy, a home not made of walls, but hugs, a fortune not of figures, but of shared laughs, and above all, the peace of those who finally found their place in the world. And this, yes, was a wealth that neither time nor the crises could take him.